Happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. Boy, oh boy, is this a very brutal waiver week. So lots of names to go over today, lots of injuries we've already covered on Sunday, talking about like all the shakeups across the NFL. So there are a lot of names out there, most likely on your waiver wire. This is going to be a very tough week to navigate, especially if you're playing in free agent budget leagues, which most of you should be at this point, but trying to navigate this landscape is going to be really fun. We're going to do our best to give you guys the best information that we possibly can and help you guys grab the right players on waiver and don't fall for the traps, because I feel like the problem is right now there's 20 different names being thrown out there and probably really only going to have like 3 or 4 of them actually do anything substantial or significant for your team. So that is the main concern for me right now, is just how many players are out there right now. We really want to make sure we get the right one. So we'll start as we always do with the quarterbacks. This is the easier one to go over. If Tannehill is out there and you need a quarterback, or even if you don't need a quarterback, but the quarterback that you have is not someone that you're looking to start every week, Ryan Tannehill needs to be rostered in every format. Had another game here, only 24 passes, 18 completions, 239 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Again, this guy has been consistent every single week. He's scored more than 20 fantasy points since he took over full-time after the game in Denver. It's been nonstop consistency with this guy, and he gets nothing but disrespect. So if Ryan Tannehill is on your waiver budget, make sure you are the team that grabs him this week. In terms of if Tannehill isn't out there, but if you need a streamer or a starter, I know they're saying that Tyrod Taylor is still the starter, but that doesn't make any sense to me, and I highly doubt that that's what they actually go with, because Justin Herbert looked pretty good playing against Kansas City. He was 22 for 33 for 311 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 INT, and also had 4 carries and a touchdown on the ground. Whereas Gardner Minshew continues to ball out, plays the Dolphins this week, really good stream, 30 of 45, 339 yards and 3 touchdowns, 2 INTs. But overall, Gardner Minshew has been, that great streamer, and he has a really good schedule for the next 3 weeks. So if you are, dealing with a Drew Brees, lack of consistency without Michael Thomas, and you need someone to stream, I think Gardner Minshew is probably your best option there. In SUPERFLEX 2 quarterback leagues, I am still looking at Jalen Hurts. With Carson Wentz being terrible, do not be surprised if they pivot and try Jalen Hurts at some point soon. I don't know that that's going to actually happen, but it's definitely something to keep on your radar. Driskel, of course, coming out, probably going to have to spend more than 0% fab there. I don't know how useful he's actually going to be, especially if Drew Lock comes back in 2 weeks. But a guy to throw out there if you're looking for another option. And then Jameis Winston, Drew Brees, there's definitely a possibility and a realm where Drew Brees' countdown clock to being benched started last night. Like, he did not look anything like Drew Brees typically does. And, with Jameis Winston there might be at some point in this season, especially if things start going south like they did last night, losing to the Raiders. Now, although the Raiders are a better team than they get credit for, that was a pretty depressing game for them. So we'll see what Drew Brees does. Just keep Jameis Winston on your radar in those 2 quarterback leagues, because there's a chance that he ends up being far more valuable than anyone would have imagined up to this point. Okay, let's jump over to the running backs. This is going to be one of the most important running back weeks to get this right. So I threw James Robinson on here knowing that he's probably I try to avoid people that are players that are owned in more than 50% of leagues. I think James Robinson is right on the cusp of that. If James Robinson is still out there, he is your number 1 priority this week. If you absolutely need a running back, you can go above 50%. I'm put 40% as like a high overarching, like that's what I would recommend most people to do regardless of need. But anytime you have a need in the waiver wire run, especially if there's a really high caliber player out there, don't be afraid to jump up a little above my recommendation. So James Robinson definitely falls into that category, but unfortunately he's probably not out there in a lot of your guys' leagues. Jerick McKinnon, someone also should have been rostered prior to this week, but if he is out there, he is another one of my favorites. With Raheem Mostert going down and Tevin Coleman suffering a potentially serious knee injury, Jerick McKinnon is going to continue seeing a lot of work. We know the 49ers like to run in committee, but with Mostert missing some time and playing the Giants this week, Jerick McKinnon is going to be an absolute smash play in week 3. and he may just entrench himself as the number 2 option there outside of Mostert once Mostert comes back, which is a very valuable role. I mean, we were drafting both Mostert and Coleman for that exact reason. And Coleman just hasn't looked good. So even if Coleman's injury isn't too significant, I think Jerick McKinnon wins that second job outside of Mostert here pretty quickly. So both of those guys, I'm going all in on. Those are if either of those guys are out there, I'm spending as much of my fab as I can to get them. And if they're both out there, geez, like, you can try to get both. Might be difficult, but you might be spending all your fab if you do. All right, then jumping to the tier 2. This is where it starts to get way more murky, and there's probably going to be 2 or 3 names here that actually have value for the remainder of the season, but it's very difficult to decipher which one. So I'm going to lay the case out for everyone and try to tell you the direction that I'm leaning, and I'll let you guys make your own decision and determination there. So first guy we have here is Darrell Henderson. Darrell Henderson looked really good on Sunday, but it took an injury to both Cam Akers and Malcolm Brown for him to finally see the field. He went 12 for 81 yards, 1 touchdown, also had 2 catches on 3 targets for 40 yards. So very productive day against somewhat weak Eagles defense. Now, will Henderson continue seeing this workload? Probably not. We know that Akers suffered a rib injury, so he's going to be out for a little bit. And then with Malcolm Brown also suffering a pinky injury, it looks like he's going to play again this week. So the workload is very, very iffy. But he did look really good. And we know that eventually we expect someone to win out in this backfield. Cam Akers looked okay until he got hurt. But if Darrell Henderson can start to weasel his way in, or not weasel, just like work his way into that backfield, he could end up having a pretty decent workload. So if he's out there on the waiver wire, I'm definitely looking and am interested in trying to acquire him. He's not someone I'm comfortable starting right away, though. That's the concern. With James Robinson or Jerick McKinnon, you pick him up, you throw him straight into your lineup, no sweat. Everyone else past this point is someone that you can spend money on, but it's still a concern. Can you actually put them into your lineup? Dion Lewis is the next one here. So I have Dion Lewis higher than Wayne Gallman and Devonta Freeman, but I don't feel great about it. Dion Lewis saw the majority of the carries on Sunday, but that was without Devonta Freeman being a part of the team, and it was also with Wayne Gallman being a healthy scratch on the week. They didn't want to go in with any more running backs, but now that Saquon Barkley is out for the year, Wayne Gallman is going to be involved. He had a decent game last year before he got hurt himself, but of course that was before Dion Lewis was there. I'm just concerned. I don't think Dion Lewis is going to see anywhere near the carry volume that you're hoping for, but he will get the passing game work. So for that reason alone, especially in PPR leagues, I like Dion Lewis more than Gallman and Freeman. I think Freeman is completely washed. He looked absolutely terrible last year, and I don't know that we can expect him to all of a sudden look better after working out with a ton of teams and never actually signing a deal with anybody. That tells me that this is a desperation move on the Giants' part, and I'm not really expecting Devonta Freeman to come out and be the workhorse guy there. And someone in your league is going to spend more on Devonta Freeman than I'm willing to, and I'm just going to let them. So Dion Lewis would be the guy I target there, but I don't feel great about it either. I don't feel like I would necessarily want to throw him straight into my lineup, even if I did sign him this week going against the 49ers. Defense that's completely decimated. I don't know. It could end up being a good play, but I wish there was a way you could see into the future and figure out which one of these guys was there. But if I had to pick, it would be Dion Lewis, and I just don't feel great about it. Mike Davis is another guy that I don't feel excellent about. So Mike Davis on Sunday, taking over for Christian McCaffrey, only 1 quarter to do so, and the game was pretty much out of hand. So I don't want to read into the fact that he only had 1 carry for 1 yard too much, but he did have 8 catches on 8 targets for 74 yards. Now, a lot of that came in garbage time. Mike Davis plays the Chargers this week, so it's going to be a difficult matchup for him as well. And what we know from the past history is with high ankle sprains with running backs, we saw this with Saquon Barkley last year. They always say it's a 4 to 6 week timeline because that's how long it actually takes for them to heal. But typically with pain management, typically with the way that the NFL runs, players usually come back about after 2 weeks. So My guess is, knowing Christian McCaffrey's work ethic and his pain tolerance, he's probably going to find a way to come back on the field in 2 weeks. Doesn't mean he's going to be very effective. It will still take 4 to 6 weeks to completely heal. But my concern with Mike Davis is that you're literally getting 2 starts. One of those against the Chargers is not a good start. And we don't know exactly how many carries he's going to get. Curtis Samuel is going to be involved. They might go back and sign Reggie Bonifant. I feel like someone is going to spend a lot of money on Mike Davis this week, especially the Christian McCaffrey or the Saquon Barkley manager, and it's probably going to end up, taking them out of contention of ever being able to pick up another guy in free agency for the rest of the year. I'm just not I'm not confident enough in the backup for Christian McCaffrey to play him for 2 weeks and hope that he, ends up trying to. If you absolutely need a starter, and Mike Davis is the only guy there, I think you can throw him in your starting lineup more so than a guy like Dion Lewis or Darrell Henderson, but I just don't know that he's going to actually be very effective for you. So Joshua Kelley, if he's still out there, is another really good name to monitor. He's getting a ton of carries there in Los Angeles. He's basically splitting the workload 50% with Austin Eckler. Had over 20 carries this week for 64 yards. Also had 2 catches for 49 yards. So he's getting a lot of usage, also getting some red zone usage near the goal line. And if Justin Herbert can actually revitalize that offense a little bit, that offense looked way better with Herbert than it did with Taylor. So I'd probably actually rather go after Kelley because I think he's going a little under the radar right now. I already talked about Gallman and Freeman. And then Myles Gaskin, I still don't want to believe in a Dolphins running back. He only had 7 carries, but 46 yards, also 6 catches for 36 yards on the week. Definitely can't ignore what he did out there. And again, he's probably going to be another one of those guys that people are paying less attention to. So while everyone is clamoring and fighting for Mike Davis and Darrell Henderson, you might just be able to sneak Myles Gaskin in and see if he can do another week like this, because Jordan Howard and Matt Breida look like they're kind of toast at this point. I'll get to your guys' questions in just a second as well. And then also looking at, if we're just looking ahead, Damian Harris is going to be coming off of IR in a week. So you got to get through week 3, and then hopefully he'll be active for week 4. Sony Michel looks washed. James White, obviously, unfortunately, out this last week. Rex Burkhead didn't look that great in his stead. And, I mean, as a whole, this team looks like they're pretty good. Cam Newton threw for over 400 yards on Sunday, and I am very bullish about the Patriots in general. Damian Harris was getting a ton of talk in camp, looking fantastic. So when he comes back, I think there's a very strong chance that Damian Harris just takes over this backfield and never cedes control to anyone else. So if you can stash Damian Harris right now, I think this is a good week to do it before people remember that he's coming back next week. And then Jeff Wilson, if both Mostert and Coleman are out, he might end up having a pretty decent game against the Giants. So if you need a 1-week play, I think Jeff Wilson is that guy. Okay, before we jump into the receivers, let me get over to your guys' questions. So the Giants already did sign Freeman. That news broke a few hours ago, so that's why it's kind of a mess. We've got Devonta Freeman, we've got Wayne Gallman, and Dion Lewis all there, all going to split some touches. But if anything, I think signing Devonta Freeman was more of an indictment on Wayne Gallman than it necessarily was on Dion Lewis. I just don't believe in Devonta Freeman. Should I drop Sony Michel for Kelley, Freeman, McKinnon, or Henderson? I would drop Sony Michel for every single one of those guys personally, and I would rank them McKinnon, Henderson, Kelley, Freeman. And especially if you're looking for a long-term running back. In a non-PPR league, I think non-PPR definitely takes away some of the excitement from McKinnon, but he's still getting a lot of yards. I would probably prioritize Kelley over Henderson in a non-PPR league. And no, I don't think you can trade Elliott for McCaffrey at this point. If you remember what happened last year with Saquon Barkley, he did come back after 2 weeks, which is what I'm expecting Christian McCaffrey to do, but he was very ineffective for, the next 4-6 weeks, because that's about how long it takes for a high ankle sprain to recover, especially when you're trying to play through it. So would I be buying Christian McCaffrey right now? Yes, but I would not be selling. I wouldn't be buying him for a top tier running back price. Like at this point, Ezekiel Elliott is the number 1 running back in terms of fantasy value. Right next to him are guys like Kamara and Aaron Jones. So I wouldn't be trading any of those guys to try to get Christian McCaffrey. If you could trade a guy like James Conner and maybe like a receiver for the guy that has Christian McCaffrey and you have enough depth to do that, that's the kind of move I would make. You don't want to sacrifice your core for Christian McCaffrey. You want to sacrifice ancillary pieces so that way when Christian McCaffrey comes back and does dominant from like week 10 on, you have a really strong roster because you still have Elliott and now you have Christian McCaffrey. So I would not trade Christian McCaffrey or I would not trade Ezekiel Elliott for Christian McCaffrey. Okay, or if you have Christian McCaffrey, I would definitely trade him for Ezekiel Elliott. So let's flip over and talk about receivers. So Traquan Smith to me is the number one guy out there this week. He looked really solid last night. Emmanuel Sanders looked like he didn't even belong on the football field. And honestly, if it wasn't for that touchdown that he scored in week 1, he really hasn't made any type of an impact for New Orleans. Michael Thomas will probably be back in a week or two. So Traquan Smith's value long-term could be interesting, being the number 2 receiver there. But he looked significantly better than we've seen him in the past. And if Michael Thomas is out again this week, that game against Green Bay, Traquan Smith is going to be an absolute smash must start this week. Went 5 for 7 for 86 yards last night. So Traquan Smith is a guy you're going to prioritize if you need a receiver. N'Keal Harry actually starting to look pretty good. Had 12 targets on Sunday, 8 catches for 72 yards. No touchdowns still. Had that one fumble near the goal line in week 1, but it looks like Bill Belichick didn't throw him in the doghouse, which is good. So N'Keal Harry likely going to be the second or third option there once James White comes back. So I wouldn't spend too much fab on him, but definitely someone you want to throw out there. Russell Gage keeps getting it done. Another 6 catches on 9 targets for 46 yards and a touchdown. I am concerned for his long-term consistency. Julio Jones didn't do too well this week, but this is a buy low moment for Julio. I think Julio will continue to regain his dominance, and I'm not sure that Russell Gage will continue to see the workload that he has, but 2 weeks in a row now we've been saying that, and it continues to happen. So if Atlanta's defense continues to let the other team score 40 points every single week, then there's room for there to be 3 receivers there. So Russell Gage is someone that should be rostered in all formats. And then Corey Davis, while not as promising of a game as we were hoping for, 3 catches on 5 targets for 36 yards, did come through with a touchdown for you. So if you started him in A.J. Brown's absence, you were rewarded for that. And, another great matchup for Tennessee this week playing against the Vikings. We get, to observe through the week if A.J. Brown is going to be able to play through that knee bruise. He might miss another week, so Corey Davis could end up being another really good start. I'm not sure what Corey Davis is once Brown comes back, being honest with you, so I wouldn't necessarily prioritize him, but he should be owned, especially in leagues where you have A.J. Brown and you need a pivot play. Okay. Let's jump over then to the tier 2 guys, and let's talk about Marquez. I'm not going to speak too much on any of these guys. There's a big list of names here. MVS becomes a better play if Devontae Adams is out, but I think Devontae Adams is going to play, especially against the Saints. The Packers want to start 3-0, and I think they're going to need Devontae Adams out there. Jalen Reagor went 4 for 4 for 41 yards. He's still getting more work in this offense, so give him a chance to continue to grow. Keelan Cole has been I think he's actually the leading receiver in terms of targets, even over DJ Chark. He was 6 for 7 for 58 yards and a touchdown this week. I'm concerned that the Jacksonville Jaguars offense is just going to be like a spread it around offense where you're not going to see like consistency week over week, so I'm not like going out of my way to acquire Keelan Cole, but the stat output that he's had for the first 2 weeks has been promising, and typically he's been a 1 week wonder, so the fact that he's done it 2 weeks in a row now is definitely an eyebrow raiser. So keep an eye out for Keelan Cole. Randall Cobb, same thing, saw a decent amount of work, 6 targets, 5 catches, 59 yards. If Will Fuller ends up missing any time due to that hamstring injury, Randall Cobb will see an uptick in targets. Laviska Shenault, another guy there in Jacksonville, but also getting carries on the ground. He had 5 carries for 37 yards, also 4 targets, 3 catches, and 35 yards. Not someone that you're throwing into your lineup immediately, but someone that could see a pretty significant role if anyone around him gets hurt. KJ Hamler, a name that should be known. He had 7 targets, only 3 catches for 48 yards, also had a carry on the ground, but that was his first game. He missed week 1, and with Cortland Sutton out for the entire year, KJ Hamler could see a decent bit of work. We're not sure how Jeff Driskel is going to continue to look, but he was able to maintain the fantasy value of guys like Kenny Golladay last year. So KJ Hamler is a very interesting stash, probably be able to get him for pretty cheap. Same thing for Michael Pittman. Didn't do too much this week, but 6 targets, 4 catches, 37 yards. With Paris Campbell out indefinitely, Michael Pittman will probably see an increased role in this offense. Zach Pascal, in the deepest of leagues, had a touchdown this week on 4 targets, 3 catches for 19 yards. Not someone I'm going out of my way to roster by any means, but if you are in a 16-team league and need a desperate situation stash, I think Pascal is a decent name to throw out there. And then Darnell Mooney, pretty much the same thing. He had 3 targets and 3 catches for 36 yards and a touchdown on the day, but I still think Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller are going to be the clear target leaders when it's all said and done. So I'm not prioritizing either of those guys. Let's see. Got this question a few times already, but I have Christian McCaffrey and Mostert. Sorry, I pour one out for you. Do I go Mike Davis or McKinnon? I would probably target McKinnon more, even though Mostert is probably only going to be out for a short period of time. I mean, if you can get both, great. I don't really know how valuable Mike Davis is going to be. You can't expect him to come anywhere near Christian McCaffrey type production. And even if he does, it's going to be, really based on him getting that kind of garbage time work that we saw last week, where he had like 6 or 7 catches in the fourth quarter. It was insane. And he was just, Teddy Bridgewater just kept checking down to him. Whereas I think Jerick McKinnon actually has like league winning upside. Jerick McKinnon is someone that you can continue to start even when Mostert comes back, because I think he's going to take over that Tevin Coleman role, because Coleman's injury is the one to actually monitor, the one that actually looks more serious than Mostert. And that offense is going to need playmakers because everyone's getting injured left and right. That defense is going to be very weak. They're going to need to score a lot of points. So I really like Jerick McKinnon. So even though it makes sense to have the handcuff there, if you can get both, great. But I would probably prioritize McKinnon over Mike Davis, even if you have Christian McCaffrey. Okay, let's talk about tight ends real quick. This shouldn't take too long because most of the good ones are already rostered, but some interesting names that performed this last week. We saw Dalton Schultz go off in the game against Atlanta. Of course, it was Atlanta's defense, but 9 for 10. He had more targets than Cooper, Gallup, or CeeDee Lamb, which is kind of dumb, but 9 for 10, 90 yards, and a touchdown. Looked decent. Can't ignore the fact that he had 10 yards per reception. I don't know that his workload will ever be that high again. They'll ever see 10 targets in a single game for the rest of the season, but we do know that Dak Prescott does favor his tight end. Jason Witten had some pretty decent games. So if you need an absolute panic play at tight end, you're just hurting badly, I think Dalton Schultz is an interesting name to throw out there, but I think someone's going to overspend on him this week. Looking at Logan Thomas again, we had him on here last week. He had 9 targets again this week, even though he only had 4 catches for 26 yards. Continues to see a massive target share in that offense. And I guess at this point, we're just hoping that Alex Smith is as healthy as he thinks he is, because Dwayne Haskins is not the answer there. But Logan Thomas looks to be the second option here outside of Terry McLaurin on Washington. So definitely someone to keep your eye on. And then Mo Alley-Cox, Jack Doyle is probably going to come back and spoil the show, but I like Mo Alley-Cox a lot. He's an incredibly athletic guy, also played basketball, which is typically the thing that we look for in breakout tight ends, incredibly athletic in people that played in basketball. That's the same corollary with guys like Jimmy Graham, but went 5 for 6 and 111 yards, and one of the best tight end games for that was definitely the best game in his entire career, but we still have Trey Burton on IR coming back, so I don't really know that he's going to have a significant role beyond this week, but you might be able to throw him in one more time if Jack Doyle is out and get a nice play for Indianapolis this week. All right, and then let's jump over. Drew Sample, we saw pour one out for CJ Uzama, who injured his Achilles, out for the year. Drew Sample had 7 catches on 9 targets, only 45 yards, but we saw Joe Burrow throwing a lot to the tight ends this last week. So an interesting name to throw out there in deeper leagues. Tyler Eifert finally came back alive. It's crazy that we're talking about Tyler Eifert and Jordan Reed in 2020, where everyone else is getting hurt. Tyler Eifert and Jordan Reed are out there scoring touchdowns because that's 2020, but Tyler Eifert, 3 of 6, 36 yards and a touchdown. And then Jordan Reed, massive day, 7 catches on 8 targets for 50 yards and 2 scores. Obviously, Jordan Reed's value is very short-lived because once George Kittle is back, Jordan Reed is not going to be someone that you were even looking at starting, but he's a nice little injury stash handcuff in case George Kittle re-injures his knee. And then Tyler Eifert, not someone I'm really trusting at this point, but if you need an absolute desperation play at tight end, you could do worse. Let's see what else we got here. Should have spent a full $100. Oh, you still have your full $100 budget. Great. You lost Christian McCaffrey. How much is the max I should bid right now to get Mike Davis? Additional question, how much should I bid for Indy's defense? So the defense question is an interesting one. That one's going to be more dependent on your league. How aggressive or conservative are your fellow league mates when it comes to targeting a defense? I would definitely try to get the Colts defense, but I'm not going to risk a ton of my fab just to acquire them, because defenses are such streamable options. Even if you don't get the Colts this week, there's going to be another decent option out there, and you're not going to start the Colts defense for the rest of the season. So I wouldn't go crazy on them. Maybe like $5 at most, if historically that would get you him. Now, Mike Davis is the more interesting one. I'd like to know, go back and watch the other running backs. We talked about them already. If guys like McKinnon or James Robinson are out there, I'd rather go after them. For the Christian McCaffrey owner, I would probably, the max I would do would be about 30. And I don't know if that's going to get him, because someone's probably going to bid like half of their waiver budget for him. And I think that's a mistake for the reasons I laid out. Talking about Mike Davis, I think Christian McCaffrey will be back on the field in 2 weeks. He won't be as effective, but you're not going to be starting Mike Davis at all once Christian McCaffrey's back. So I'm not going to spend more than 30% of my waiver budget for someone that's only going to give me 2, maybe 3 weeks of potential starting time. And I don't even know that Mike Davis' role is going to be something that's even worth like a running back 2. It might even be like a high-end running back 3. So it's hard to spend your waiver budget on something like that. Should I drop Zach Moss for Myles Gaskin? That's an interesting question. I still believe in Zach Moss. That offense really has not done anything in the run game. They've only passed it thus far, but the defenses that they've played have kind of allowed for that. So if you absolutely need a start play, I would probably rather start Gaskins than Zach Moss this week, but I think I'd rather have Zach Moss long-term. We'll see who ends up, getting the workload there. You can't start Moss at this point, which sucks, but I still feel like he's a better stash than Gaskins, because I just don't trust that Dolphins offense at this point. But if you have a strong feeling about Gaskin, I won't stop you from doing it. But it's not something that I would probably do. I'd probably hang on to Moss. Okay, let's talk defenses. We've already mentioned the Colts and the question we just talked about. The Colts are definitely the best defense to target this week, and you're pretty much just going to go after the defense that plays the Jets every single week. If you can't get the Colts, a couple other defenses here that are pretty low owned are the Buccaneers facing Jeff Driskel and the Broncos. Now that game is in Denver, so maybe that could go a little sideways, but I like what we've seen from the Buccaneers defense 2 weeks in. The Chargers get to play Carolina. I like Carolina for the fact that they are going to continue to throw in the ball, air in and out with Teddy Bridgewater there, but the Chargers defense has been pretty dominant. We saw them keep Patrick Mahomes in check for 3 straight quarters, so I think the Chargers could have a pretty fun day going against the Carolina Panthers without Christian McCaffrey. And then we saw the Cardinals defense absolutely decimate Washington. I think the Browns can do the same with Myles Garrett, get a lot of pressure on Dwayne Haskins. So the Browns are absolute cheapest option here, but if you need a stash or a play this week, I think the Browns will have a pretty decent option. I wouldn't spend more than $5 on the Colts, and all these other guys are maybe like $2-3 worth. Because again, you're always going to be able to find someone you can just throw out there for a week, even if you can't get any of them. All right, that is it for our waivers. So again, very difficult week here, trying to get this right. Pretty much to recap and summarize, my 3 favorite options, if they're on your waiver wire, and they might not be, but my 3 favorite options are James Robinson, number 1, Jerick McKinnon, number 2, and Traquan Smith, number 3. Beyond that, if those guys aren't out there, Dion Lewis, Darrell Henderson, Mike Davis are the best guys to go after for the running backs, but I'm not really overspending on any of them, so I'd probably just throw the same bid on all of them and see if I get lucky with one of them. With wide receivers, outside of Traquan Smith, we've got guys like N'Keal Harry that I'd be interested in going after, Corey Davis, Russell Gage, about 10% budget on all of them. The running backs I just mentioned, Darrell Henderson, Mike Davis, and Dion Lewis, all between 20-30% depending on need. If you need a running back start this week, push it up a little bit more. If you're just doing it for depth, probably don't need to be going out of your way I would go out of my way no matter what for James Robinson or Jerick McKinnon, though, because I think those guys can actually be great starts for the remainder of the season. And even if you don't have need right now, it's always good to have another starter at the running back position. So that's how I'm doing it this week. I don't know exactly how your league format is. If you have a specific question, always feel free to comment in the comment section. I'll get back to you, so that way you can at least have someone to bounce your thoughts off of. But yeah, that is how I'm viewing this week. So hopefully this helped you guys. This is a very pivotal week. Don't be afraid to spend your money this week if you need to. And even if you don't need to, like this is going to be one of the more, you probably won't see another week this big. I pray to God that we don't see another week like this due to injuries. But this is probably going to be the biggest week in terms of the amount of players that are out there on the waiver wire. Going forward, there's only going to be like one or two. This is a pretty unique week. So again, don't be afraid to go out there. And also, like one more tip for anyone that's watching this to the end, be very vigilant to observe who gets dropped this week, because people are going into panic mode, losing a lot of players. If there's someone that's underperformed for 2 weeks, you could see some really dumb names get dropped. Like maybe you see someone drop someone like Allen Robinson. It would be stupid. It shouldn't happen, but I've seen it happen before. There was a league that someone had showed me the other day that someone had dropped Jonathan Taylor after week 1. Don't know why you would do that, but it happens. So make sure you double check after the waivers run. Go and look and see who was dropped, and that might end up being more lucrative in terms of value if you missed out on someone in the initial run. So save a spot on your bench or two for the guys that get dropped this week, because there's going to be some interesting names that get dropped out there. But yeah, hit me up in the comment section if you guys have any other questions. Would love to answer those for you, and hope you guys have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll see you later for our trade video.